Hi and welcome to this Pixelz tutorial on size, margins, and alignment. In this tutorial, we'll be briefly explaining each of these settings, but most importantly, showing how they interact with the shape of your product and each other to affect how your finished images will look. Choosing appropriate sizing, margins, and alignment settings and keeping these consistent across each product type will drastically improve the look and feel of your site, communicating professionalism and building trust with your customers. Understanding how these three settings work will enable you to make the right decisions based on your products and help you make sure that the images you receive back from Pixelz meet your expectations. We'll begin here on a new specifications page. You can see at the top under basic settings that we have vertical object alignment and margins over here. And over here on the left, we have sizing. So let's start here with vertical object alignment. You'll see if our sample image is something like a t-shirt or something that almost fills this entire frame, this alignment will not make much of a difference when changing from top, center, and bottom. But once we switch to an example image, for instance, a shoe, that does not fill most of the shape of the selected frame, this becomes very important. Center alignment is generally a good option for most types of products, but there are some exceptions. For instance, a shoe, or if you're using bags, these products are best suited for bottom alignment, since the height and shape of these products can change from image to image. Bottom alignment places all of these products on the same baseline as if they were on a shelf, which creates a more consistent look on your website. Next, we have our margins selection here. Margins refer to all the white area you see between the object and the frame of the image, and adjusting the percentages of the margins here will change the amount of this white space in the frame. Notice that if you increase the amount of margins, the size of the product reduces in the frame. So that's a quick overview of how alignment and margins work together. Now let's take a look at how they interact with size settings and the shape of your product. So over here on our sizing options, if we select the first one, which is no change, you'll notice that our options over here for alignment and margins disappear because we've selected not to alter the sizing or object positioning. If you don't want us to change the size of the image or the position of the product in the frame at all, choose this option. The next sizing option we have is aspect ratio. And if you look at this drop down here, it contains common aspect ratios like a 1:1 square and different versions of landscape and portrait orientation. And this is where we can notice the interaction with sizing and the previous alignment and margin settings. So let's take a look at a 1:1 square aspect ratio paired with a relatively square product like a t-shirt and center alignment and 10% margins. Very straightforward in the combination of alignment, margin, and sizing settings. But if we switch the sample image that is completely opposite of the aspect ratio, like a wide shoe and a tall and narrow portrait ratio, you'll notice first that only the left and right margins have been taken into account, but also you'll notice that the shoe appears much smaller in relation to the frame with this aspect ratio. Then if we change to a wide aspect ratio, like a 16:9 landscape, with a wide product like this same shoe, the shoe appears much larger in the frame. But in both of these examples, the actual width of the image would be defined by the number of pixels in the image of the shoe plus the left and right margin percentages. But please note that the actual width in both of these examples is the same. Though since these images are being viewed on the web, you don't see the full dimension size of the image displayed, you just see how big the product is within the frame. So while the width size is the same, the shoe will be displayed on the web much larger in the landscape setting than here in the portrait setting. This is a very key takeaway to understand how the product shape, margins, and aspect ratio work together to display your final images. So next in our sizing options, we have exact size. If you have specific requirements in image dimensions, you would use exact size setting to set this in pixels, millimeters, or inches. You can enter the correct width and height dimensions here to meet your requirements. Depending on the dimensions you enter here, your image will either be square or some form of landscape or portrait. So bear in mind that everything I just explained about the relationship between aspect ratio, product shape, margins, and alignment will also apply when you choose this option. Next is crop tightly. Crop tightly is our sizing option that defines the size of the frame solely on the shape of your product here, plus the margins you have set. So this will crop as tightly as possible around your product with the margin percentages you wish to have. Next sizing option here is use min and max settings. This is a popular sizing option for customers selling on marketplaces such as Amazon, as they generally require that images cannot be below or above certain sizes. So with this option, you can specify here on the dropdown where you want your dimensions enforced on the image. So we'll choose enforce on the largest side, and then you can set your minimum and or maximum dimensions for the image. The option for enforce on the largest side is most commonly used by marketplaces. eBay and Amazon, for example, both express their image size rules in this way, which will say images must be at least, but no more than a certain amount of pixels on the largest side. With this option, the image that we output will always be the largest possible image size given the size of the inputted image. For example, if we choose enforce on width, the finished image would be the exact size of the width of the product in the image plus the margin settings that have been set. Then we would take a look at the min and max sizes that were set up for this image. Say 1000 min and 3000 max. And if the width plus the margin of this original image is not at least the 1000 pixels, then our editors will have to reject the image because it is impossible for them to create an image based on these specifications because the inputted image is not big enough to meet these requirements. And if the inputted image is not big enough to meet these requirements, we cannot enlarge the image without ruining the image quality. And on the other end of the spectrum, if this inputted image is say 5000 pixels wide, then the editor will have to reduce the width of this image down to the maximum 3000 pixels here to meet the specification requirements. And this wraps up our tutorial in showing how sizing, margins, and alignments interact with the shape of your product and with each other to affect how your finished images will look. We hope you've enjoyed this tutorial and thank you for watching.